On February 4th, 1963, search aircraft began moving through the frozen wilderness south of Watson Lake, looking for a plane that had gone down. And beneath that same white forest, Helen, Klaben, and Ralph Flores were still alive. Their small Howard aircraft had crashed after leaving Whitehorse. Snow and trees swallowed the wreckage. From the air, the place where they were trapped could look like nothing at all. But inside that hidden crash site were two injured survivors: a 21-year-old passenger from Brooklyn with serious injuries, and a pilot from California trying to keep both of them alive in winter country where cold could kill faster than hunger. They had no clear road out, no visible rescue path, only wreckage, snow, injury, and the hope that someone above them would notice a sign before their bodies gave out. So the question was not just how they survived the crash, it was how two people stayed alive for 49 days while the search passed through the region and still could not see them. And the answer begins with the worst possible kind of miracle. The crash did not kill them, it left them waiting. Helen Klaben was not supposed to become part of a winter survival story. She was a young woman from Brooklyn, traveling from Alaska toward the lower United States and trying to get south. Ralph Flores was a pilot from California, flying a Howard aircraft on a route that took him out of Whitehorse toward Fort St. John. Before the crash, the flight was just transportation, away from one place to another. The danger had not yet narrowed down to one patch of forest and snow near the Yukon-British Columbia border. Then the aircraft went down. Available accounts commonly describe poor visibility, snow, low flying, and trees as part of the crash sequence. The exact mechanics should be handled carefully. What is clear is that the plane did not land on a runway, did not stop near a road, and did not leave its two occupants within reach of quick help. It came down in winter wilderness. Both Helen and Ralph survived the impact. That was the first impossible part, but surviving the first minutes did not mean they were safe. Helen was seriously injured. Accounts describe a broken arm, a foot injury, and later severe frostbite. Ralph was injured too, with reports describing facial injuries, a jaw injury, rib injury, and cuts. The aircraft had carried them away from the known route, then left them inside a landscape that gave them no easy way out. A crash site can be loud when it happens and silent a few minutes later. The engine stops, the snow absorbs sound, the forest closes around the wreckage. What remains is metal, torn material, injured bodies, and the sudden problem of staying warm when there is no building, no road, and no one standing nearby.
For Helen and Ralph, the wreckage became the first shelter. In one way, that saved them. The broken plane gave them material to work with. It offered some protection from the open air. It gave them objects that could be turned into cover, insulation, or signal material. In a place like that, almost anything from the aircraft could matter. But the wreckage also created the deeper trap. From the ground, the plane was the center of their world. From the air, it could disappear. Snow and trees can erase shape. A broken aircraft under forest cover does not always look like a broken aircraft. It can look like shadow, drift, branch, an empty white space. A person on the ground can be alive, awake, and desperate, while a pilot above sees nothing that clearly says where to land, where to turn, or where to send help. That was the problem that would define the next 49 days. Helen and Ralph had survived the impact, but they had survived into invisibility. In the early period after the crash, they had reason to believe rescue might come quickly. A plane was missing. People would look. Search aircraft would move through the region. The crash was not on another planet. It was in the north, in winter country, but it was still connected to a route, a flight, a missing aircraft, and people who knew something had gone wrong. That hope mattered. It could keep a person working through pain. It could make the first night feel like something to endure until morning. It could turn every engine sound above the trees into a possible rescue. But hope becomes dangerous when it delays the moment when a person understands that help may not be close. Reports about their early food situation differ in the details. Some accounts say they did not ration strictly at first because they expected to be found. Others describe only a small amount of food from the beginning. The safe truth is that they did not have supplies for anything close to the length of time they were about to spend there. No one boards a small aircraft prepared to live for 49 days inside the wreckage. They had to make shelter from what was available. They had to create heat. They had to melt snow for water.
They had to limit movement because movement cost strength, and both of them were injured. Every simple action became more expensive than it would have been anywhere else. Getting warm was not one problem. It was the problem that kept coming back. Cold does not need to arrive all at once. It seeps in, through clothing, through metal, through the ground, through the space between sleep and waking. It works while a person rests. It punishes injured limbs. It makes hands less useful and decisions slower. The winter wilderness gave them water in one form, snow. But snow is not water until it is melted, and melting it takes heat, time, and effort. Drinking enough mattered. Staying dry mattered. Keeping heat going mattered. Protecting injured bodies from more exposure mattered. The crash had left them with an emergency. The cold made it continuous. At first, the outside world was still a source of hope. Somewhere beyond the trees, people were searching. Aircraft were moving through the region trying to find the missing plane. The cruelest fact is not that nobody looked. It is that looking was not enough. From above, the survivors needed to become a shape that made sense. A crash in the forest can be hard to distinguish from terrain. Snow can cover marks, trees can hide broken parts, weather can reduce what a pilot sees. A search area can be large, even when people know the general route. The human eye has to catch something that does not belong, and in a white landscape full of shadows, that can fail. Helen and Ralph were not lost because the world had forgotten them. They were lost because the world could not see them. That difference changed the survival problem. If nobody is searching, then the problem is distance. If people are searching and still missing you, then the problem is visibility. It means the answer can not only be surviving one more night. The answer has to become being noticed. Every day they remained alive, their bodies paid for it. Food ran down, strength ran down. Injuries did not heal the way they would have in a hospital bed. Frostbite and exposure became more than threats. Helen's condition worsened over time. Ralph was also dealing with his own injuries while trying to help keep the two of them alive. There was no clean division between patient and rescuer inside that wreckage. Both were survivors. Both were hurt. Both were trapped in the same weather. Ralph's role has sometimes been discussed through later reports and questions about the flight. But inside the survival story, reducing him to blame would flatten what mattered on the ground. He was injured too. He remained part of the work of staying alive. The crash had happened, and the immediate question was no longer what should have happened in the air. The question was, what two injured people could still do in the snow? They could use the wreckage. They could conserve strength. They could keep trying to signal. They could melt snow. They could mark the landscape in ways that might make sense from above. They could continue long after the first plan, the simple plan of being found quickly, had failed. The middle of survival is often quieter than the crash. It is repetition with consequences. The same cold again. The same pain again. The same limited supplies, only smaller. The same need to wake up and continue, even when continuing has no clear reward. A person can survive a crash in seconds and then spend weeks being tested by minutes. The aircraft remained their shelter, but also their reminder. It was proof that they had fallen from the sky, and proof that the sky still had not answered. Any sound above them could start the same cycle. Hope, attention, waiting, nothing. They were still alive below the search planes, alive below the routes of people trying to find them, alive beneath a forest that made them look absent. After a while, survival had to become something visible. They needed a message large enough, clear enough, and strange enough to stop a pilot's eye. Smoke might blend into weather, wreckage might vanish under snow and trees, but letters in snow could turn the ground into a statement. The signal that mattered was an SOS and directional marking in the snow. Those letters carried what their voices could not carry. They told the air that the white surface below was not empty. Someone was there. Someone had made this. Someone needed help. The SOS did what the crash site itself could not do. It separated their location from the wilderness around it. That did not mean it worked instantly. A signal still has to be seen by the right person at the right moment, from the right angle, with enough visibility for the shape to register. Until that happened, it was another act of effort in a place that had already consumed so much of their strength. By late March, Helen and Ralph had been missing for weeks. 49 days is hard to picture because it is too long for the first emergency feeling to last. It is long enough for the outside world to change its expectations, long enough for search efforts to become more complicated, long enough for hope to thin out, long enough for the body to stop feeling reliable. For Helen, the damage was already serious. Frostbite would later leave permanent unfortunate consequences. Rescue, if it came, would not return her to the person who had boarded the aircraft. Still, they were alive. On March 24, 1963, Bush pilot Chuck Hamilton's aircraft spotted the SOS and directional signal in the snow. Some accounts differ on exactly who inside the aircraft first noticed it, so the important fact is the sighting itself. The message on the ground had finally reached the sky. That was the moment when the hidden crash site stopped being invisible. For weeks, Helen and Ralph had been living inside one small place in the wilderness. For the pilots above, the same wilderness had been a search problem. Forest, snow, weather, distance, and uncertainty. The SOS joined those two realities. It told the outside world that the missing people were not just possible survivors. They were still there, but being seen from the air was not the same as being carried out of the snow. A rescue still had to reach them on the ground. The terrain had to be crossed. Their condition had to be handled. They had to survive the time between discovery and removal. After 49 days, the final danger was not dramatic in the usual way. It was practical and unforgiving. Finding someone alive does not erase what the cold has already done. On March 25th, a rescue party reached Helen Klaben and Ralph Flores. They were taken from the wilderness and brought for medical treatment. The impossible part had become real. Two people who had crashed in winter country, remained hidden from search aircraft, and endured hunger, injury, and cold were found alive. The rescue confirmed the central irony of the ordeal. The search had existed. The survivors had existed. For weeks, those two facts had failed to meet. A signal in the snow finally closed the distance. Afterward, the story became known far beyond the crash site. Helen Klaben later wrote the book, Hey, I'm Alive! The survival story was later adapted into a television film. In public memory, the case became one of those accounts that sounds almost unreal when reduced to a single sentence. Two people survived a winter plane crash for 49 days while searchers failed to find them, but the single sentence leaves out the cost. Helen suffered severe frostbite and later lost several toes. That fact should not be turned into spectacle. It is enough to say plainly, survival did not mean leaving untouched. The wilderness had taken something permanent before rescue arrived. The deeper scar was not only physical. The crash was sudden. The waiting was slow. A crash happens once. Waiting happens again every morning, every night, every time a sound passes overhead and does not become rescue. Helen and Ralph survived because they kept using what remained. The aircraft, the snow, the heat they could make, the strength they still had, and finally the message large enough for someone above to understand. The answer to the question is not one trick. It is a chain. They survived the impact. They turned wreckage into shelter. They endured cold and hunger longer than their supplies were meant to last. They kept trying to be seen. And when the hidden crash site finally became a visible SOS, the outside world found them before time ran out. But the final image is not only rescue. It is a white forest with search aircraft somewhere above it and two people below who were still alive in a place that looked empty. For 49 days, the crash did not finish them. It made them disappear.